Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ben Glickman. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general with the state of California. Far more importantly, I'm an alumnus of this wonderful program. I was lucky enough to be on a national championship team way back in 1995. So I've been involved in one form or another for 25 years or so.
My name is Candida Steel, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I've handled federal government contract disputes around the country, and I've been involved with the program about 20 years myself.
Hi, I'm Marcia Holland from Missoula, Montana. I was a career public defender in Alaska for my legal career, but now I teach at the law school here in Missoula, and I too have been part of this program as either a mentor or a judge for about the same number of years. So I'm excited to be here again this year, even if it's a little bit different this time.
If you could introduce yourselves and your teacher, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Nate McKeever, and I'm a sophomore at Cottonwood Classical.
Hello, my name is Olga, and I'm also a sophomore at Cottonwood Classical.
Hello, my name is Zora, and I am also a sophomore at Cottonwood Classical.
Hi, my name is Anessa D. I'm also a sophomore at Cottonwood Classical in New Mexico, and we're here with our teacher, Mr. William Bill.
All right. Well, congratulations on making it to the national finals, and thank you for sticking with it with schools closed and the unique circumstances. We're thrilled you're able to still participate and really excited to be here. So if you guys are ready, I'll ask the question, which should be no surprise. Ready?
Yes.
All right. Your question is number 3. In 2020, we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which recognized the right of women to vote. Despite recent controversy, the Equal Rights Amendment has not yet been declared ratified. What are the similarities and differences between these two amendments? What impact, if any, has the 19th Amendment had on women in achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? What are the advantages and disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments rather than ratifying a national constitutional amendment? Whenever you're ready.
As said by Ida B. Wells, quote, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and it does not seem to me that notwithstanding all these social agencies and activities, there is not that vigilance which should be exercised in the preservation of our rights." We agree that the 19th Amendment was only the beginning of sex-based equality. However, even after its 1920 ratification, American women are still treated as inferiors in the workforce. Therefore, the Equal Rights Amendment was brought into existence aiming to establish equality in terms of divorce, property, employment, among other matters. The ERA was introduced in 1923 and passed by Congress in 1972, but because of a lack of national action, it was never fully ratified. Later on, the Equal Pay Act of 1963 was enacted in an effort to make it illegal not to receive, quote, "equal pay for equal work" due to the extensive gender-based pay gap that has existed for centuries. Still, white-collar women were legally barred from this right, and consequently, the pay gap still exists today.
Next steps towards equality were Title 7 and 9 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Nevertheless, employers still found ways to undermine the employed female population. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said that every constitution written since the end of World War II includes a provision that men and women are of equal stature. Ours does not. Justice Ginsburg is strongly in favor of the ERA, but believes that it should be rewritten and revoted on by the states. Virginia recently became the 38th state to ratify the ERA, 38 years after its 1982 deadline, unfortunately changing nothing. The 19th was the gateway which allowed women to have a say in the Republic of the United States, while the ERA is a proposed step further into the establishment of true sex-based equality. And while we agree with Justice Ginsburg in this being true for the United States, other countries such as Australia and New Zealand had granted universal suffrage before the 19th and therefore were not directly affected by its passage.
However, other countries such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE granted female suffrage only recently, despite the numerous calls for societal change that began in the 1960s. During the 2011 elections, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia allowed women to vote and stand for election. Subsequently, during the general elections in 2015, Nama al-Sharan became the only elected female in the Federal National Council. As a result of a direct order from President Sheikh Khalifa in the 2019 elections, 7 women were elected and 13 were appointed to ensure that half of the FNC was female. Women in the UAE were granted the right to vote and stand for election in 2006. There are several advantages and disadvantages to states passing their own equal rights amendment. Due to the differing opinions of people in each state, each ERA would be different from the other. Some states would support equal rights in all spheres of life, while others would be satisfied with the current MO. For example, Wyoming and 19 other states granted women the right to suffrage before the 19th was ratified, while others opposed it.
On the other hand, states which don't ratify the ERA would leave women in the current unequal circumstances similar to those appealed in Minor v. Happersett. The Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment didn't guarantee female suffrage, making it harder for women to achieve suffrage across all the states. A similar situation could arise surrounding the ERA. In terms of the ERA, New Mexico amended Section 2, Article 18 of their state constitution in 1972 to say equality of rights under law shall not be denied on account of sex. Other states such as Arizona and Utah have not ratified it, but many states already have similar amendments in their constitutions. If all states were to get their own ERAs, it would make the protections of the ERA cover all bases sooner, and each state would be able to satisfy its own equal rights, necessities, and expectations. When the 19th was passed in 1920 and secured by Lesser v. Garnett in 1922, female suffrage was fully guaranteed in the U.S. This essential right opened up new spheres of work and life for women across the U.S., demonstrating that men and women are political equals. Thank you.
Ben, you're on mute.
Sorry. Please put away your notes if you haven't already done so, and then we'll follow up with some questions. Canada?
Okay. Virginia, you mentioned that Virginia became the 38th state to pass the ERA in January 15th, 2020. Do you think the archivist should just register this new amendment?
I think that to register the new amendment, it would still need all the ratification, and that another ratification might be necessary, just due to the fact that how dated the initial ratification is, since it did pass Congress in 1972.
I do feel I feel as though we stand with Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in that the ERA would need some reform and to be presented again to the states for ratification, just so that we're all on the same page, so to say.
Well, that leads me to my question. You had mentioned that several states have already adopted some form of equal rights amendment within their state constitution, and I heard you say that at least it would be great if each state could do so. But doesn't that subject kind of arbitrary? If you live in one state, you might have a little bit more protection than another state. Wouldn't it be better, as you just said, to just start again and propose a new ERA nationally? And if that were the case, what model would you look to? Do any of the states that currently have an ERA have a really good model of what the word should say?
I think that when we look at how each state has their own ERA, like you said, a national one is probably needed, but we can pick apart the good parts of those states' ERAs, and that way, when we have a national ERA, a lot of the states are represented in what they feel women should.
Thank you.
I feel as an example, our own state, I would say, has a pretty good example of an amendment added in that the language used is very concise. And I think in our own state, we see a lot more females are, this might be biased, but I'd say they're more respected in the workplace, almost to what would seem as an opposite, like the female majority.
Thank you. So you mentioned in your prepared remarks about how the 19th Amendment wasn't enough. There had to be, lots of legislation after that to advance the goals of equality for women. I guess my question is, why wasn't the 14th Amendment enough? Why isn't the Equal Protection Clause all we need? Can't we just interpret the Equal Protection Clause to protect women, and isn't that enough, and we don't need the ERA or any of these other amendments?
I think that yes, in theory, the 14th Amendment should have been enough. But I think that the 19th Amendment, what it really did was push societal's view of equality of women, and how the laws based around national suffrage for women and whatnot were needed just to push the societal view of how everyone thought.
Yes, I agree with my colleague, and unfortunately, throughout the course of history, having a 14th Amendment that specifically says that you won't be discriminated on the basis of your race or previous condition of servitude was needed in order for society to embrace the fact that race doesn't play a role in that people shouldn't be discriminated on the basis of their sex, and therefore having the 19th passed made society accept the fact that sex also shouldn't play a role in determining the right to suffrage.
So the 19th and the proposed ERA both use the term sex, shall not be denied rights on the basis of sex. Is that different than gender? And should we use some other term altogether, or would there be consequences of it just being limited to sex?
I think that from a legal perspective, yes, sex is what is protected and whatnot, and that is different than gender as we see in our own society today. So a new law or amendment would be necessary just from a legal perspective, but I think that sex should necessarily be enough to establish equality of genders everywhere as well.
I feel as though we have to make the distinction between sex and gender. And right now, as you had mentioned, we do have law regarding discrimination against sex. And as my colleague said, we do need to have new laws referring specifically to gender, because the two are different, and the two, I'd say, need different parameters.
On the other hand,
you can finish your sentence.
On the other hand, we could go back to what Ruth Bader Ginsburg said about the ERA needed to be back and refreshed, and we could pull in things about gender, protecting them, so we can have a broader spectrum of what can be protected under law.
Thank you.
Great job.
I can't remember who's going first, me or you, Marcia?
You are, Ben.
Oh, all right. Well, congratulations, and I think that's it for the whole class. So congratulations to the whole class. That's wonderful. So I thought you guys did a very nice job. I thought your prepared remarks covered a lot of ground. You started from a basic thesis that the 19th wasn't enough, and that basic thesis kind of carried its way throughout all parts of the question, including the subparts that was kind of underlying what you were talking about, including when you were talking about some of the drawbacks of relying on states to do this. And likewise on the Q&A, I thought you guys did a very nice job. Don't be afraid to provide additional examples or to back each other up. We're short on time, so the pithiness was appreciated, but I think there was a couple, especially earlier on, where you might have gone one step further or a little deeper on the questions. But as we warmed up, you guys were ready to go. And I like my question about the 14th Amendment. I like the notion that the 14th Amendment should have been enough, but it proved not to be enough. And that's why we needed everything that's come since the 14th Amendment. I think, at the Proposition 8 trial about same-sex marriage, the lawyer Ted Olson was asked, when did same-sex marriage become a constitutional right? Was it in 1985? Was it in 1975? And he said it became a constitutional right when the 14th Amendment was enacted. We just didn't realize it until today. And I think that's what you were getting at with that answer. So it was very sophisticated. Nice job and good luck.
And I'll jump in. Your timeline was succinct. It was very, I mean, you had the information, you knew to answer the question, you used your time in your prepared format well, which suggests that you've thought a lot about this, about how to present the information. You know it. You did a good job of letting us know you know it. That's hard to do. My students probably couldn't have done, and I teach at a law school level, and they couldn't have done as an efficient job at communicating as you all did. One of the things that it hasn't been identified as much, because the United States is lagging behind concerning the 19th Amendment's purpose with other countries, but the fact you used UAE and the changes that have been made there in this century, that's a really good point to make. So there are still places where this is a big deal to have implemented. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness about that. One of the things I really liked was the answer that maybe we could look at that language in each of the states' ERAs and take the best from each of them to craft a new proposed equal rights amendment. That's a really smart, thoughtful answer. You want to steal the best from each state if you're going to start again, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg wants us to do. So that was really thoughtful and really good. And I liked the answer about maybe the word sex is enough if you just give it a broad enough definition. And maybe it isn't. That was a good conversation to have. So great job.
Great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this performance as well. You did a lovely job. I hope you would, I certainly would agree with things like bringing up Australia and New Zealand hadn't gone that direction. That was really nicely done. Thank you. You're done now for today, and you must be pretty pleased to have done so, but I hope that this experience has also inspired you all, that you will be better citizens as a result. It will matter more to you. You'll be more involved. You'll watch the news. You'll be much better citizens, and hopefully better participants in our culture, in our society. I'm looking forward to your generation being in charge. You certainly have shown that you know enough about what's going on, more than most people do right now. So I will be much happier when I'm in my nursing home rocking on the front porch to know that you all are in charge. And I really have enjoyed this. Thank you so much. I hope you have too. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think you're all sophomores, so the opportunity to be in a leadership position in your schools is amazing. Being involved in something that can help with your school and your community, I really encourage that for you, because you have demonstrated such capability today. So congratulations.
Exactly.